You're listening to A Radio.
Thank you for joining us. You're listening to A Radio, and this is The Morning Moment. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. You can find us on most social media platforms such as iTunes, Spotify and iHeartRadio. Go to our website, aradio.wordpress.com, for details, where you'll find more content and details on our podcasts and more. One of the things that many people seem to have overlooked is what we've been enabling China to do for more than 25 to 30 years. For this period of time, if not considerably longer, China has been buying up all so-called Rust Belt companies, if not entire industries, all over the world. One example I witnessed firsthand was from the heart of England, the motor industry that finally collapsed for a myriad of reasons. In the 80s, China stepped in, bought the assets, stripped the site clean, a place well known since the turn of the 20th century. Yes, the 20th century. This place was called Longbridge in the city of Birmingham, the heart of England. You will hear next how devious and underhanded they really are at negotiating. This is a short clip from a programme that the BBC did. Here's that clip.
Conspiracy, cock-up, or inevitability. Whatever the reasons, the result was that on the 15th of April, car-making at Longbridge ended. We've all seen the headlines about management paychecks, but this isn't a story of bosses running a company for mere personal gain. It's one of naivety, missed opportunities, and plain bad decisions. Yet, just before the closure, things had been looking up. It seemed the bosses were a whisker away from an agreement with the Chinese car giant Shanghai Automotive, a deal to secure thousands of British jobs and catapult MG Rover into the big time. They claimed the Chinese were just 20 minutes away from finally signing on the dotted line. The press was summoned here, to the boardroom at Longbridge, to await the announcement. I can remember the day. The entire motor industry were holding their breath. It was to be the culmination of over a year's worth of painstaking negotiation.
I'd get daily updates from one of the bosses to how the deal was going.
One man, a senior insider at MG Rover for 5 years, agreed to talk now only if we concealed his identity. While the workers waited for good news from China, he had doubts about the way the talks were going.
They found the Chinese very difficult to deal with. I think they're actually much smarter than the British team. I was told they'd spend all day talking about precisely where the comma should go in the contract. They were very shrewd and smart.
As the various updates filtered in from Shanghai, he felt his colleagues were struggling to close the deal.
The MG Rover team found themselves completely outgunned by the business brain of the Chinese. The Chinese had an incredible work ethic.
And he wasn't the only one concerned, as I found out. This is the $1 million McLaren F1, the world's fastest road car. And this is its celebrity designer, Peter Stevens. He was hired by MG Rover to help give their models a facelift and was in China for some of the negotiations. While there, Stevens saw firsthand how the host did business with the men from Longbridge.
We went to have a banquet of fascinating, magic things to eat, very interesting. There was a drink called Mao Tai, which people drink there in a small glass that you can kind of clasp in your hand and throw it back. And I was looking at the Chinese people opposite, and they weren't throwing it back. They were doing all that shouting and yelling and throwing the glass in the air, but they weren't actually drinking it. And I've watched even more carefully, and when it came to the wine, they would be holding the glass as wine was supposedly put. They weren't drinking, but they were doing all the play acting of being drunk, and leaning about and stuff. And then after midnight, it was to repair to the bar to begin negotiations. I thought that was crap, quite honestly.
So, were negotiations done for the future of MG Rover while everybody was slaughtered?
It would be wrong to say they were slaughtered, but I think the Chinese would have given themselves an advantage there.
Conviviality can be used as a weapon. You find you're drinking, you're toasting every full stop, every comma, and then to your horror you realise that your hosts are not, by which time you're too far gone. But then you've got to be careful that you don't get yourself into a position where you are going to sign away the crown jewels or say something you're going to regret in the future.
But even if they were stone cold sober, there was cause for regret, because at the end of last year they signed away the rights for MG Rover's car designs. The aim was to get the Chinese to sign a joint venture, pumping £250 million into Longbridge and securing its future. But they apparently sold the Chinese the rights to make Rovers in Shanghai for just £67 million before the main deal had been done.
Was that a very, very bad business decision to give that stuff away before you'd even signed the deal?
It'd be probably comparable to putting a condom on after sex.
Now all those people have lost their jobs, the site has gone, it's now a housing development, and more. And with it, not only a whole industry, but a way of life, just as has happened in Pennsylvania with the steel industry. China has spent time scouring the world for businesses, buying them up and shipping them back to China, lock, stock and barrel. This was only stage one. We all saw it and thought perhaps it was a good thing. But more disturbing was stage two. They have at the same time systematically been buying up raw materials, minerals, or the rights thereof, all over the world, whilst at the same time buying the businesses that go with those minerals. So what does that mean? Well, let's put it in simple terms. Many countries are now mulling over downgrading, relying on China for their manufacturing capabilities. The problem is, where do you go to get the raw materials required to restart those industries and those businesses? Or putting it simply, who controls the raw materials? Whoops. So what do we do? Well, you tell me. How do you make something you need that, let's say, for national security, if you don't have access to those key minerals? So that's where we are today. No one wants to talk about this. Understandably so. China knows they've got all of us over a barrel. It's just like a junkie and his source. The provider holds control over the junkie. So if you want to make your things in your country, pretty much anything, thanks to liberals and Agenda 2030 and shutting down oil and coal, etc., we are in the West more and more dependent on China for everything. We can't just turn on the spigot of manufacturing and think we'll be okay, because unless we've got the raw materials to make those things, we are no further forward. The problem is that we don't think far enough ahead. Our society has always been a just-in-time society, a 5-year or 10 years. China thinks 100 years ahead. So that's why they are beating us at our own game. Unless we start thinking 100 years ahead, we will be beholden to China for everything. And at some stage, they will overtake us technologically, which is a threat to all our freedoms, despite what liberals think everywhere. While we're worrying about carbon tax and climate change, China's producing more and more coal power stations. While we're worrying about windmills, sticking them up all over the place, China is worrying about how to make windmills to sell to us. because we don't want to make them, but we want to use them. How can we continue not making things and be independent? My father always said to me, a country that doesn't make anything isn't a country. And now we see examples firsthand of that, where medical shortages abound everywhere. That's just one example, but it applies to every industry. If we want to live the way we want to live, we have to control every aspect of how we live, not listen to these Agenda 2030 nutballs, people like Trudeau, who are traitors to the country that I'm in, and there are many others. Canada's got them, America's got them, Britain's certainly got them. This is all being driven by the UN, people like Soros, and there's many Soroses out there. He's just the one that pops up above the surface. If we don't change how we think, rather than 5 years and 10 years, but 100 years, we are doomed. And the Liberals keep pumping more and more immigration into our countries to change the way we think. Why? Because they're being bought and paid for by the Chinese, thinking 100 years ahead. It really is that simple, that if we elect people who are nothing more than puppets for China, we deserve what we get, and we're going to get it pretty soon. When they start blocking off the South China Sea, and we can't stop them, the game is not only afoot, it's actually over. Now, I don't expect many people to hear this, but I had to get it out there. It's important for you to think about this and argue the case the opposite way round. I expect YouTube will ban this. Twitter will find some way to block it. I don't bother with Facebook because that's basically censored. You can't get anything out on Facebook anymore. It's a joke. So I ask my Republican friends in the United States to label social media as a necessary service. Then it can be regulated, and then it falls under the banner of free speech. And then we can start getting our voices out there again. It doesn't matter about Canada blocking things, because America's so much bigger, the word will get out. But if we don't get out there and spread the truth about what China's doing, it will be too late. We can't wait another year. We've got to act now.
You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, Spotify, and email. We're on Spotify under the podcast section. Type in Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass these links on to your friends. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com/A-Radio. EHRADIO, A-Radio. And please click on the like button. Join us Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern, and tell your friends and pass the word. We only tell the truth, not what the mainstream media want you to know.